being the president's autobiography titled Dreams from My Father, a story of race and inheritance. Now, although this book was published way back in 1995, the mainstream media is only just beginning to pay attention to some of its explosive content.
I spent the last 2 years of high school in a daze, locking away the questions that life seemed insistent on posing. I kept playing basketball, attended classes sparingly, drank beer heavily, and tried drugs enthusiastically. I discovered that it didn't make any difference whether you smoked reefer in the white classmate's sparkling new van, or in the dorm room with some brother you'd met down at the gym, or on the beach with a couple of Hawaiian kids who had dropped out of school and now spent most of their time looking for an excuse to brawl.
All right.
To avoid being mistaken for such a sellout, I chose my friends carefully. The more politically active black students, the foreign students, the Chicanos, the Marxist professors and structural feminists and punk rock performance poets.
Punk rock performance poets? Well, it's good to know the president was so close to them and all those Marxist professors. Him describing how he attended socialist conferences and other conferences while at Occidental College.
Political discussions, the kind that at Occidental had once seemed so intense and purposeful, came to take on the flavor of the socialist conferences I sometimes attended at Cooper Union, or the African cultural fairs that took place in Harlem and Brooklyn during the summers. A few of the many diversions New York had to offer, like going to a foreign film or ice skating at Rockefeller Center.
Let me start. Let's go back. The president loves to talk about President George W. Bush. Let's look at the media's attack on George W. Bush. The issue? Drug use.
After sidestepping the question for months, GOP presidential frontrunner George W. Bush has issued a limited denial about past drug use, saying he has not used illegal drugs in the last 7 years. An answer sure to raise more questions today.
Did Texas Governor George W. Bush ever use cocaine, or didn't he? The question is dogging his otherwise smooth campaign.
As for whether Bush ever used cocaine or other drugs, his plan to refuse to reply directly to such questions has been modified on the fly as the press and opponents pursue the issue.
There are 13,000 people perhaps watching this broadcast in prisons in the state of Texas who are in prison for either the sale or possession of cocaine. The act of using it is a felony. Is it not germane as we near the election for a presidency? Is it not germane to know that about someone's background?
Now, President Obama admits that he drank heavily, did drugs, plural, enthusiastically, and even admitted to doing, quote, his words, not mine, a little blow, cocaine. Is the media fair?
Sean, it's very simple here. There's one reason and one reason only that George Bush did not come out and say, I did cocaine. He all but suggested it, all but admitted it. But he never used those words for the simple reason that had he said those words, you know and I know, and nobody can deny this, that every single newspaper in America above the fold in screaming headlines would have the next day, Bush, I did cocaine. Every national network news story would lead with story after story after story about how George Bush did illegal drugs. That would have been the end of his campaign. Now, a few minutes ago, you were talking to your guests, and you made a good observation. You said the people you talked to have never heard about Barack Obama doing drugs. Here's this statistics that you're going to love. In 2008, in the primaries, there were 1,365 stories on Barack Obama. How many stories dealt with his drug use?
None. Just a guess.
He admitted he did it, not one single story on him.
Let's watch the media coverage of Barack Obama. Same issue.
I'm thrilled that I have my mother and my daughter with me tonight.
Hillary Clinton's new ad may be uplifting and positive, but a top official with her campaign this week got right down into the gutter, focusing attention on Barack Obama's teenage experimentation with drugs, something Obama has never tried to hide.
Let's use phrases like rolling the dice in an alley somewhere, and the guy used cocaine, and the guy has the Islamic background. There's a lot of slur aspect to this.
And you said you turned even to drugs, alcohol, right. Cocaine even, because you couldn't find your place in the world. What was that like for you?
You smoked marijuana and inhaled.
Right. I did.
And did a little blow, as you put it, when you could afford it.
Uh-huh.
Explain that.
I mean, I have one more example, and this is the media coverage. Remember the October surprise in 2000, which I would argue probably had a pretty big impact on the race, and that was the issue and the coverage of the DWI just prior to Election Day, as we may all remember here.
The reporters were all chattering about this and saying, wait a minute, if he's got this skeleton in his closet, what else is there? And some were saying, remember, he never answered those questions about hard drugs.
Governor Bush, as he said later in public, didn't want his daughters to know it. The problem with that explanation is that it doesn't quite pass the smell test.
The Bush campaign has continuously labeled Vice President Gore, rather, in the past as deceptive. So why don't you think this is legitimate fodder for the campaign, given some of the bombshells that the Bush camp has lobbed towards Vice President Gore?
You know, right before the camp, you know, by the way, remember, Republicans, they flip-flop, but Democrats like the president, they evolve. Very big difference in the coverage.
They don't just grow.
You learned a lot that you did not already know about the 44th president of the United States, but you're not alone. Now, the Daily Caller's Michelle Fields took our cameras into the streets of New York City to see just how much the average American knows about the Obama autobiography. And as you can imagine, some of them, well, were pretty surprised at what they heard. Let's take a look at this.
Have you heard about some of the controversial statements in President Obama's Dreams from My Father book?
No, I haven't.
I chose my friends carefully. The more politically active black students, the foreign students, the Chicanos, the Marxist professors.
How do you feel about that?
Concerning.
How do you feel about the president hanging out with Marxists when he was a young man?
I've personally hung out with some bad people, so I don't think it's that bad of a thing as long as he's not with them today.
Wow, I did not know that.
I do not respect that. Do not agree with that.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty deep there.
Doesn't make sense to me at all. Like, why hang out with Marxists? What's the point?
And he really blamed them because this information hasn't been out in the media. They haven't heard about it. And a lot of them are wondering, how is it that a man ran in 2008 to be the leader of the free world, and yet he attended socialist conferences, he hung out with Marxists. I think they were all just very confused.
Did people say that to you?
In 2008, when I wrote my book, I experienced the same thing. I would meet people, they had no idea why they were adamantly defending this guy. They knew that it was cool to do it, but they had no idea why. So it's not too late. Let's figure out what he's about, where he came from, and how all of this policy that's been so ineffective, where did he get that from?
Yeah.
What is he about?
Deneen Burrell, you wrote your book about being a liberal in New York.
Conservative in New York.
Conservative in New York,
Yes.
Exactly. And Deneen, you wrote a book, Blacklash.
Yes.
Bestseller, did very well, but you also start in the beginning of the book how if I Google your name, you're excoriated by people because you're African American, you're conservative.
Absolutely. Anytime I talk about my conservative views, I am attacked, especially when I'm on your show, Sean. But, you know, we talk about vetting. But we talk about the importance of vetting Obama, how it was not done by the media. It's really important for the American people to do so. I mean, and when you look at his energy policy, for example, our economy runs on energy. It's the lifeblood of our economy. He has a war on coal, a war on fossil fuels. It's hurting hardworking Americans. It's harming businesses. Our energy prices are going up. And he talks about wanting to fix things, but look at what he's doing. Look at his actions and his policies. They're harming our country, and people are hurting right now.
In other words, one of the reasons is that the policies on the left can't sustain the light of day.
Yeah.
Because as they begin to take hold, when Lyndon Johnson was 2 years into office, he was thoroughly rebuked because all the things that he promised got passed. And there was an overwhelming rejection of the Great Society in 1966. This is why they don't do it. This is why they concentrate on the bullies and all of the old stories like that.
To pick up what they're adopting in terms of tactics and strategies, does it work?
Of course not. That's why he has to end up creating this whole war on women strategy. That's why he has to come out and say that he's endorsing gay marriage at this point. He has to start firing up his base because he knows that at this point everything is a very tight poll-wise between him and Romney. He's not even thinking about independence. He's thinking about making sure that he can get his base out and get them to the polls. He's more concerned